Well, I say that.
Hello, we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence in this episode of Newscast, and I'm going to be talking about it with Alex Forsyth. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
What AI, what, you know what would make me even better? You tell me which AI tool would make your job or life easier.
Ooh. God, okay, suppose for the job, I would like an AI tool which texted every MP in the House of Commons the same question when I was trying to find something out.
I knew you were going to say, because I was thinking the same thing. Because we spend so much of our lives phoning up going, how are you going to vote? What do you think about this?
Yeah.
Have you sent in, an AI tool that tots up how many letters of no confidence have been sent to the chairman of the 1922 committee to get rid of the Prime Minister? That'd be great.
That's an excellent AI tool. But in my life, I would still like them to find an AI tool that makes a decent cup of tea in the morning so I don't have to myself. Because, you know, not the teas made of old, but it would be game changing in my life if I could have a cup of tea in bed without having to get up and make it.
One that came up with really good, amazing puns for titles of Newscast episodes. That'd be pretty good.
Oh, you don't need that. Your
Actually,
team is so good.
Human touch, actually, nothing will replace them.
Nothing.
Exactly. Right, but we'll talk about this issue slightly more seriously than that on this episode of Newscast.
Newscast from the BBC.
Hello, it's Adam in the studio.
Hello, it's Alex in the studio.
So, Alex, we had a weird thing today where there's going to be this massive summit next week about artificial intelligence, hosted in the UK by Rishi Sunak.
Have you heard that it's at Bletchley Park, by the way?
It's at Bletchley Park, famous for coding and computing and all that stuff. It's almost like I'm bored of saying it already. No, but he did a weird sort of trailer today. He did like a speech about the summit that he's going to have next week.
Yeah, it was a bit weird because there was a bit of a rumour that this might happen, and then there was no news out of Number 10, and then on Wednesday it was suddenly, oh yeah, there's a speech, you should go. So it was a sort of preview of what's going to be 2 days of coverage of AI from Rishi Sunak, where he basically, my takeaway, and I'm no expert, maybe we'll talk to some, but my takeaway was that it's really, really scary in some aspects, but you know, there's some potential opportunities here too.
I'm glad you mentioned the E word, experts, because we're joined by a pair of them now. Professor Hannah Fry, podcasting legend, scientist, author, all things. Congrats on Uncharted.
Thank you very much.
Top of the charts on BBC Sounds.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
And also here is Professor Gina Neff, who is the boss of the Minderoo Centre for Technology and Democracy at the University of Cambridge, which sounds like a delivery service if you need an academic.
Exactly.
Call up a Minderoo.
That's what you called, right? Yeah. That's why that you call an expert.
So before we get into what might happen at the summit next week and some of the stuff that was in the speech today, I find the whole AI debate like really fascinating, but quite intangible. So can you give me some just examples that would just make it really clear what actually we're talking about here?
When you say what we're talking about, because I think that there's like looseness and hand waving in every possible direction. I mean, even the term AI, I think actually there's quite a lot of fluff around that.
Can I just say that I was presenting my other show, Any Questions, when one of the audience members came up to me and said, can you stop saying AI? To my generation, that means artificial insemination. And I was like,
all the farmers.
Good point. Yeah.
Do you know what? Let's try and narrow it down, because today they were talking about frontier AI quite a lot.
Yes.
What's that?
Okay.
Frontier is at literally the frontier of our technology and the frontier of our research. So at that frontier, there are risks of things we don't know. How will AI develop? How will people and companies develop AI? We are expecting the unexpected. To date, so far, in some of these models, they've shown great capability very quickly, much quicker than was expected. So that when they're talking about a frontier AI, they're talking about things that go beyond where we are today. There's another word, foundational model, and that's another term for thinking about, you know, what are the technologies that other companies are going to build on? And I think those are kind of the two terms that get bandied about.
I think I still need some examples, though.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a science writer called Ted Chiang, really amazing science fiction writer, and he talks about how he was once in a Twitter exchange where someone said, how do you define, or what is AI? And the response was a bad choice of words in the 1950s, right? Which I think is actually a really good point, because up until this point in time, really, maybe a little bit of time ago, I think it would be better to describe what we've been through as a revolution in computational statistics, right, than intelligence, which is admittedly a lot less sexy, depending on how you feel about statistics.
I was going to say. I mean.
Well, I mean, we have the expert here.
But I think that is fair to say. I think that it's about manipulating data. It's about constructing things based on numbers, right? At the heart of these things, they are just numbers.
Well, yeah, because ChatGPT has basically just scanned every word on the internet and then used that to create its model, as you were saying, to then create more words.
Exactly.
New combinations of old words.
Exactly. But I think the key point that Gina has made there is that we are at this moment where actually those things can perform much better than expected. So even though I think it's still a bit of an open question as to whether these algorithms can have ever demonstrated a conceptual understanding of what they're actually doing, I think that's still, I don't think we're quite there yet.
And the research, the consensus in the research field is that we may actually never get to that space. Right. We're not
actually genuinely smart.
A genuinely
computer.
smart computer with, what's called general intelligence, artificial general intelligence. We may never get there. So the idea that we're worried about robots taking over our world and our planet, that's pretty far out in terms of where the expertise, the consensus of expertise is.
Yeah, this isn't a humans versus AI question, right? You can't think of one as a direct replacement for the other. But all of that said, there are tools that we have created over time that have proved to be phenomenally powerful, like spreadsheets, for example, right? I mean, I think of AI as like spreadsheets. And spreadsheets are not by themselves good or evil, right? But they can be used for good things. And they also, in terms of like some really dark stuff of accounting for people, of situations of genocide, actually they can be really used in negative ways. And I think that is, the sort of analogy there works, right? You've got to think of this as a tool that we have created that is fundamentally about statistics, but can be used in extraordinarily good ways, but potentially in extraordinarily harmful ways.
See, that's really interesting because I think there is a perception, and I would say I'd acknowledge myself in this, that I sometimes think that some of the fear around AI comes from the perception that it's going to run away, that it's not just what you can use it for, it's what it will then go on to do itself without any kind of element of control behind it. But are you saying that that's not at the moment something we should be too concerned about?
Well, no.
Okay.
That's a very low probability, and it's not a zero probability. And so in today's speech, the Prime Minister said those really low probability things are things government should have on their radar. And honestly, we should scan the horizon to see how people are assessing that, what kinds of frameworks they have in place, how they're thinking about models, how they're thinking about those risks. Can we get some joined up thinking and in his words, shared understanding about what those risks are? That doesn't seem crazy or irresponsible. In fact, it is a role of
government to do. And that's why his big centerpiece today of his speech was announcing this safety institute based here in the UK that will do all of that stuff. So that's a good idea.
Do you want me to give you an example?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So let's say that you have got, this doesn't exist at the moment, but let's say that you've got some kind of AI, some agent that is capable of doing more than one thing, right? So it's not just a language model, it's something that can browse the internet, or it's sort of stitch things together. And you say to it, okay, you know what? Your objective is, I love postage stamps, right? And I want you...
You're not wrong.
...to... Hey, who doesn't?
I mean, they're very expensive now. They're a luxury item.
This is true. But I want you to go and collect stamps for me, okay? I want you to use the internet. I want you to collect stamps. So the algorithm starts off and it's like right on eBay and it's sort of buying loads of stamps. And then it realizes, well, okay, the limiting factor here is that I need is money. So actually, if I just start investing in the stock market, make more money, I can buy all of the stamps that are ever listed on eBay. And then it's like, well, hang on a second, why am I waiting for them to be listed on eBay? Why don't I, or other auctioning sites are available, why don't I start manufacturing them? So sort of commandeers some factories, starts harvesting forests for wood to get the paper, and eventually, I mean, as we say, this is very low probability stuff, but eventually is like, what else is a good source of carbon? Humans. And so all the time because it doesn't understand the world in the same way as we do, because it doesn't understand context, it doesn't understand nuance. If you set it an objective and say, this is what we want you to do, this is your sole purpose.
Right, it won't have the same limiting factors to stop it doing that, like
Exactly.
things like, morality or, what's just sensible. Right?
Exactly.
And let's talk about the capabilities of the AI systems we have in place today, right? So, this is a far-reaching, low probability thing, but we have tools at hand right now that could basically mimic this podcast. And instead of bringing in Gina and Hannah to talk to you, you would just use a set of voices that sound like reasonably like ours. And these are real choices being made in newsrooms right now. Should they have their reporters being read by AI? So it sounds like one of the journalists, but it's actually not their voice. What does that do to trust in society? What does that do to trust in news? We're going to have 90 elections around the world in the next 18 to 24 months. We're going to see an enormous amount of synthetic media that's going to come out. Now, that's a kind of risk that's not on the table for the AI summit next week, but it's a risk that a lot of people care about.
So you think the agenda for this summit at Bletchley Park next week is too narrow?
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, the agenda is an agenda for an international summit. So there are a lot of risks to AI that people really care about. I think these technical risks and what the risks that the AI and AI Safety Institute is going to take on board, those risks are really, it is a very focused look at a very particular sliver of AI. But what about people's jobs? What about our schools? What about our skills? What about our readiness? What about our regulators? Like, let's get really boring. Do regulators have the staff and the tools that they need in order to make really reasonable decisions in this country? Those are not questions for an international summit. You don't want the US and China there in the room when you debate, like, what are we doing about British jobs? So to bring actors together, to bring states and companies together right now to talk, you really are going to focus on those, focused risks rather than what I call the kumbaya.
So the focus risks are the things that Rishi Sunak was talking about, like cyber attacks, like, these kind of big, tangible things that might happen if AI kind of spiraled out of control. That's going to be the focus of the summit. But what you're saying is there should be a parallel process to look at the day-to-day stuff that might just really seep in and affect the way that we live in society.
If we think about the UK as, in the world of producing AI, we are third behind the US and China in terms of the amount of investment, in terms of the research, in terms of the capability we have now. If you take a slightly more narrow focus on responsible, trustworthy, and safe AI in the research and the innovation that's happening in this country, we are punching above our weight in that field. So it's completely sensible that the UK takes this global leadership, because we are a global leading place for doing responsible and ethical research.
So it's realistic that the UK will end up being like the world's policeman for this.
Well, so some politicians have told me that, the online safety bill,
this piece of legislation that has taken years, or beyonks to use a technical phrase.
Let's be clear. They have called it the first AI legislation, the first piece of legislation about AI, because it's creating, quote unquote, the safest place in the world to be on the internet. Lots of debate over this bill, which became law today. We really do not have to rehash that here, but it shows a trajectory of a British approach to that legislation.
You mentioned China. Liz Truss, who was Prime Minister until 1 year and 1 day ago, has put out a pretty punchy statement saying that China shouldn't have been invited to this thing next week, and you only want your friends and allies and people who aren't trying to subvert democracy there. Does she have a point?
Listen, it's in some ways it's not our summit to plan, but if you're going to have a summit on the frontier of research in AI, the really tip of the edge, and you want to do that horizon scanning, it doesn't make sense to have number 2 not in the room. Now, she's not wrong. Did I just say that in a podcast? I did say that. there's different conversations you have with friends and allies. And as we know, last week, Five Eyes made a joint announcement of the
Oh yeah, so
sheer-
the five countries who are kind of team up when it comes to intelligence sharing, like the US, Canada, us, Australia, New Zealand.
Exactly. They came together and said the amount of espionage that is happening, that China is doing, is extraordinary. And they briefed Silicon Valley companies to show how compromised their systems are. So she's not wrong that you have different kinds of conversations with your allies. But from where I stand, anything in this geopolitical context that brings the US and China together to, talk and thaw just a little bit is probably a good thing.
And Hannah, no, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I think in general that you sort of have to think of this summit as though it's really talking about the one part of AI safety which has to be a global agreement, right? This is the equivalent of thinking about the risks of future pandemics, right, or of nuclear safety. This is the kind of thing that they're talking about, right? The AI equivalent of that. And for that, it doesn't make sense, exactly as Gina says, to not have everybody around the table. And so I think China has to be invited. But I sort of wonder why the decision wasn't made a bit earlier. I thought there was a bit, I think it should have been a bit more.
Could have been smoother.
We don't even know they're definitely coming yet, do we? Haven't we heard that they've accepted the invitation, but TBC if they turn up? I
also think it's the same. It's true with Germany as well.
It's true of Germany. Yeah.
But Hannah, I was going to just end with you, and as somebody who's made documentaries about inventions over the last 200 years, what is a useful kind of comparison to make with this era? Because you hear people saying, "Oh, it's a bit like the invention of electricity." Then you have other people saying, "No, it's like inventing cars," and then think how many car accidents there are now. You sort of just talked about nuclear proliferation there. What's the best one, or actually? Is that not a useful tool?
I mean, I think it sort of is in a way. I do think the invention of electricity is probably the most similar in the sense that you have, in electricity on its own actually isn't that,
It's quite boring.
It's not that interesting, right? It's the number of different ways in which it can be used, the number of tasks that it can end up affecting, and also the development of it over time, like how you kind of layer technology on technology on technology. So I think that's the closest. But I also think that actually, I do think that we are standing at this very interesting moment in history where we are at the brink of really advanced technology. I think that if you look at the acceleration of technology over the last 100 years even, it's really crazy. If the hundreds and hundreds of years before that, and then how things have changed very quickly in the last century, I think that acceleration is set to continue, and I do think that that's one really good thing about how Britain is placed in this and at this moment. This is an exponential curve that's only going in one direction, and I think that the sooner that you get on board with it, the better placed you are as time goes forward.
Hannah and Gina, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, now for something completely different. And Alex, I've got a little treat for you. Here is a sneak preview.
Ooh.
Oh, sounds so cheesy when you say that. Of episode 3 of Planet Earth.
Amazing.
3. This is some maned wolves in the wild. And this was very hard to film, as we're about to discover. And the director of that episode is here. It's Kiri Celle. Hello, and congratulations on a
Thank
great
you for
episode.
having me.
And
Pleasure
also
to
sitting
be
next to her is Dan Smith from Bastille, who's done lots of the music. Hello.
Hi. Oh, you have to justify that because otherwise it just sounds insane that I'm here. He's just turned up at our studio. Just totally unannounced. Yeah, just a fan of the podcast, just wandered in.
See a microphone, can't resist. So it makes a change from like selling out stadiums.
It's not
doing a nature documentary.
It's been great. I've been just getting to talk about how much I love Planet Earth. It's been lovely.
Were you a fan before?
I was a massive fan, but I feel like I've really interrupted. You were about to talk about.
Well, yeah, we'll come
to the person who produced and directed
on your
produced and directed the entire episode. Yeah.
So how hard is it to like track down a maned wolf?
Maned wolves in particular are so elusive. I mean, you're working in a place where the habitat is grass, which is 1 meter high, and you have. Do you guys know what a maned wolf looks like?
Well, we've just seen it.
You've seen one.
Yeah. So. Sort of like
I didn't until now.
Yes, sort of like a fox on stilts. So even though they're really big and really tall, they're super shy, super elusive, and almost impossible to see. So we took on the challenge of trying to film them, and through using new technologies, we're able to uncover so much about their lives. And, they're a threatened species, so it's really important that we could, first of all, capture a sequence that was engaging and sort of teaching people about this incredible animal, but also that footage was then used by researchers and scientists in the field to learn more about the species. So it's been a really amazing sequence.
When you make these programs, so you obviously go into it with the kind of ambition of which species you're going to film and what you're going to see, and then how do you work that out? Do you just study their habitat, try and follow their patterns, and then how long does it take from all that to actually getting your moment on camera?
It really depends. So normally we're in the field for at least a month, because you really have to you have to have this really authentic relationship with the animals that you film, and it takes a while for them to settle with you and for you to sort of understand a bit about them and how you're going to get the sequence you want to film. So it normally takes potentially up to 2 years of research with experts in the field.
2 years.
Yeah, because of course the bar is so high. I mean, we want to film everything that's new, something that hasn't been seen before. Animals are really difficult to see and let alone film. So it really pushes us and the research team at the very beginning to find those stories. And it sometimes takes years to get, for instance, the Maine wolves took 3 years to get to the point of filming. So we worked with scientists, pioneering scientists that had collared them, which was the only way that we could potentially find them and then film them. So it's a long old process. But
Dan, what's it like kind of interacting with the footage of the animals? Because that gives the music a whole extra oomph, doesn't it?
My experience of it was I absolutely loved it. Obviously, I love scoring and writing for projects that aren't my band. It's my favourite thing. So I was asked to be involved, sort of did a bit of singing on the theme and a bit of writing on the theme, which was really exciting. And then after that, we went off on tour for about 6 months, and I would just get sent individual scenes with no music, and sometimes a sort of temporary voiceover, and sometimes no sound at all.
Right.
And it was really fun. It was brilliant. I what better than being in some windowless backstage room in the middle of America and having these incredible visuals to get to sit with. And I think everyone on tour thought I was mad, because I would just sit there with headphones on at my laptop, holding a microphone with a little mini plastic keyboard,
right?
Just singing. I would stack up basically choirs of me, which I'm sure, collectively hopefully sound good, but individually, I think.
What? So you were in the tour bus in between Albuquerque and Scottsdale, Arizona, with your keyboard watching
on my laptop. Yeah, watching scenes as they came through. I worked on the music with Hans Zimmer and Jacob and Sarah, who both work at Bleeding Fingers, which is his kind of big studio. So it was great. I mean, I very much came into it apologetically, saying, I'm an idiot and would love to help, but don't want to step on any toes. But they're amazing. They were so inclusive, and it was brilliant for me just to have when we're on tour, it's sort of the same thing every night.
Yeah.
Which obviously some people love, some people love slightly less. But this was the thing that's totally made my year. I mean, just getting to be a tiny part of this amazing show.
This is the third series, right? But it's just had such a big impact beyond it just being something to watch, which is, wonderful and engaging. Did you kind of feel that responsibility when you were making it? Oh my goodness, I'm conscious that people are really into this, and actually there's a kind of consequence to what I'm doing here as well, which might inform scientific communities or anything else.
Absolutely. I mean, working for Planet Earth 3 is an absolute dream come true. I remember watching Planet Earth 1 at university. So it's kind of
Was it the dream then that one day maybe that could be me?
Yeah, definitely. Wow. So
I'll sit in that field for 3 years, not moving.
And of course, there's a huge pressure knowing the audience and the legacy of such a big series, but it also means it pushes us to make the best series and sequences. I went to bed every single night, and every single morning I woke up thinking about my program, and I know that's exactly how the team operated. It meant everything to us. So it really is a passion project for all of us, and making sure we get the best stories, the most dramatic sequences, take you to new places, bring you into the animals world, but also show you what's give a true reflection of what's going on the planet, and also touch on really challenging and important things as well.
It's interesting you said that, because I also watched it. I remember watching Blue Planet at school and Planet Earth at uni, and there's something about the escapism of the lack of humanity in the early versions of those shows that I think some people love. You could sort of switch off and forget about humanity, and it's been really interesting of just sort of being vaguely across this show. the decision to make it much more about like the human impact on the climate.
It's a little bit more kind of activisty campaiggainery now, actually, compared to the classic Attenborough shows.
I mean, I think it's interesting that you say that. That's obviously climate change shouldn't be politicized. I don't think it is. I think it's just telling things as they are. It's just a fact. But it's interesting that's another conversation. But that in and of itself is politicized. Shouldn't be. But
has it radicalized you?
Has it radicalized me?
Yeah, like who cares about the climate and the planet? Like, do you care about it even more now?
Oh yeah, I think so. Well, I don't know. Actually, that's a good question. I just, of course, yes. I'll ponder it. Thanks. I mean, of course. I think what's really brilliantly done in the show is obviously with climate change. One of the reasons why people choose to not engage or can't engage is because it's such a huge problem that's so much bigger than like the generation that we live in, the time that we live in, and the communities that we live in. It's massive, and this just does a really brilliant job at showing examples of it, but also I think it's quite hopeful as well. Like it tries to not just hit you around the head with it. I think as a series, there are so many examples of people doing amazing things, and trying to impact the world in a positive way. So it's quite nice. It's not like I was chatting to people the other day and they're like, I don't know if I want to watch it. It's just gonna make me feel bad about what we're doing to the planet. And I was like, no, it's hopeful. So it is. It
really is.
It's filled with these amazing stories.
Kiri, is there an animal that's like the Holy Grail that all wildlife filmmakers, they want to get it and no one's been able to do it yet?
Loch Ness Monster.
I mean, if you get that,
you'll probably be there for a while.
Planet Earth 17.
I think it depends on who you speak to. I mean, The Ocean, which is the next programme in the series, which is airing on Sunday, it is full of so many undiscovered new species. So for all of us that are passionate about the natural world, knowing that there's still frontiers that are to be discovered and animals that we don't even know about, that's really what gets us excited. And I think that's what pushes all of us. I mean, I filmed Maine wolves and Saiga, and a lot of people didn't even know they existed. So it's like, great, we can show an animal that has been living on this planet since the woolly mammoth, and it's great to be able to reveal that to our audience, and hopefully that's another way we can captivate and draw them into the series.
And another way to draw people in is with the Planet Earth podcast as well.
Absolutely.
Joining us on BBC Sounds. Everyone's got a podcast in this episode.
It's trendy, apparently.
It's almost like, it's a booming. Yeah. And Dan, last question for you. Yes. I mean, obviously the title track is the song Pompeii. So does that mean you think about the Roman Empire all the time? Just to use another meme.
Yes, probably more than most. Because I sing it every bloody day.
I'm sick of it.
Of that song?
Yeah.
Weirdly not.
Okay,
I think
that's good.
Basically, people always ask us that, but at our gigs, a couple of things. Firstly, you'd have to be very stone-hearted to not get excited by seeing, 10,000 people jumping up and down and being very happy about something. But also, for us, it's the end of our gig.
Oh, it's home time.
It means it's home. It means like
school bell.
It means the work day is over. Exactly, it's like the school bell. So I've never not been happy to sing that song.
Will Bastille play the Sphere, that amazing round concert venue in Vegas?
It looks insane, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if we could afford to film footage on that scale. We'd have to borrow some stuff off the Planet Earth.
Oh no, I'd like to see Planet Earth.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
There's an idea.
Like a collaboration.
Yeah.
Let's make it happen.
People have been saying around the office. Honestly, so many people, including me.
You've now got it stuck in my head.
Yeah, thanks for that little a cappella arrangement. We should got you to do it.
I'm glad you did it, not me.
Copyright infringing. The Planet Earth podcast is available on BBC Sounds, and if you've missed any episodes, this series is available on iPlayer as well. Anyway, right, thank you very much for being on the podcast, and thank you for listening. We'll be back with another one very soon. Bye.
Newscast from the BBC.
Do you believe in ghosts?
I believe what